Welcome to Unique Top 10s, and in today's video, the top 10 most infamous serial killers. Ricardo Leiva Muñoz Ramirez, known as Richard Ramirez, was an American serial killer, rapist, and burglar. His highly publicized home invasion crime spree terrorized the residents of the greater Los Angeles area and later the residents of San Francisco area from June 1984 until August 1985. Prior to his capture, Ramirez was dubbed the Night Stalker by the news media. He used a wide variety of weapons, including handguns, knives, a machete, a tire iron, and a hammer. Ramirez, who claimed to be a Satanist, never expressed any remorse for his crimes. The judge who upheld Ramirez's 19 death sentences remarked that his deeds exhibited cruelty and viciousness beyond any human understanding. Ramirez died of complications from B-cell lymphoma while awaiting execution on California's death row. He murdered a total of 15 people. Pedro Alonso Lopez is a Colombian serial killer who was sentenced for killing 110 girls, but who claimed to have raped and killed more than 300 girls across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. During his incarceration for car theft, Lopez claimed he was brutally gang raped and that he hunted down his rapists and killed the most brutal while still in prison. He said that after his jail term, he started murdering young girls in Peru. He claimed that by 1978, he had killed over 100 of them and that he had been caught by a native tribe who were preparing to execute him when an American Christian missionary intervened and persuaded them to hand him over to the state police. The police soon released him. He said he moved to Colombia and later Ecuador, killing about 3 girls a week. His whereabouts are unknown as of 2020, and he is currently wanted by the police. Gilles de Rais was a knight and lord, a leader in the French army, and a companion in arms of Joan dArc. He is best known for his reputation and later conviction as a confessed serial killer of children. In 1434 or 1435, he retired from military life, depleted his wealth by staging an extravagant theatrical spectacle of his own composition, and was accused of dabbling in the occult. After 1432, Rais was accused of engaging in a series of child murders, with victims possibly numbering in the hundreds. The killings came to an end in 1440, when a violent dispute with a clergyman led to an ecclesiastical investigation that brought the crimes to light and attributed them to Rais. At his trial, the parents of missing children in the surrounding area of Rais's own confederates in crime testified against him. He was condemned to death and hanged at Nantes on 26 October 1440. Joachim Georg Kroll was a West German serial killer, child molester, and cannibal. He was known as the Ruhr Cannibal, the Ruhr Hunter, and the Duisburg Man-Eater. He was convicted of 8 murders but confessed to a total of 14, which he committed in and around the Ruhr metropolitan region. He began killing in 1955. Kroll was very particular about where he killed, only killing in the same place on few occasions years apart. This, and the fact that there were a number of other killers operating in the area at the time, helped him to evade capture. Kroll would surprise his victims and strangle them quickly. Afterward, he would strip the body and have intercourse with it, often masturbating over it again. He would then mutilate and cut off pieces to be eaten later. Upon returning home, he would have intercourse again with a rubber sex doll he had for this purpose. He died of a heart attack in 1991 in the prison of Rheinbach. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer active in the largely impoverished areas in and around the Whitechapel district of London in 1888. In both the criminal case files and contemporary journalistic accounts, the killer was called the Whitechapel Murderer and Leather Apron. Attacks ascribed to Jack the Ripper typically involved female prostitutes who lived and worked in the slums of the East End of London, whose throats were cut prior to abdominal mutilations. The removal of internal organs from at least 3 of the victims led to proposals that their killer had some anatomical or surgical knowledge. Even though it is said that he killed a minimum of 5 victims, he is on this list because of historical context and gruesomeness of his crimes. John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer and sex offender known as the Killer Clown, who assaulted and murdered at least 33 young men and boys. Gacy regularly performed at children's hospitals and charitable events as Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown. He was also active in his local community as a precinct captain and building contractor. Gacy would typically lure a victim to his home, handcuff them, then rape and torture his captives before killing them by either asphyxiation or strangulation. The conviction for 33 murders was the largest number of murders charged to one individual in the United States until that time. Gacy was sentenced to death on March 13, 1980. He was executed by lethal injection at Stateville Correctional Center on May 10, 1994. Hamilton Howard Albert Fish was an American serial killer, child rapist, and cannibal. He was also known as the Gray Man, the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Brooklyn Vampire, the Moon Maniac, and the Boogeyman. Fish once boasted that he had children in every state, and at what time he stated his number of victims was about 100. However, it is not known whether he was referring to rapes or cannibalization. Fish was a suspect in at least 5 murders during his lifetime. He confessed to 3 murders that police were able to trace to a known homicide, and he confessed to stabbing at least 2 other people. Fish was apprehended on December 13, 1934, and put on trial for the kidnapping and murder of Grace Budd. He was convicted and executed by electric chair on January 16, 1936, at the age of 65. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster, was an American serial killer and sex offender who committed the murder and dismemberment of 17 men and boys from 1978 to 1991. Many of his later murders involved necrophilia, cannibalism, and the permanent preservation of body parts, typically all or part of the skeleton. Although he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and psychotic disorder, Dahmer was found to be legally sane at his trial. He was convicted of 15 of the 16 murders he had committed in Wisconsin and was sentenced to 15 terms of life imprisonment in 1992. Dahmer was later sentenced to a 16th term of life imprisonment for an additional homicide committed in Ohio in 1978. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by Christopher Scarver, a fellow inmate at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portgate, Washington. Andrei Romanovitch Chikatilo was a Soviet serial killer, nicknamed the Butcher of Rostov, the Red Ripper, and the Rostov Ripper, who sexually assaulted, murdered, and mutilated at least 52 women and children between 1978 and 1990 in the Russian SFSR, the Ukrainian SSR, and the Uzbek SSR. Chikatilo confessed to 56 murders and was tried for 53 of these killings in April 1992. He was convicted and sentenced to death for 52 of these murders in October 1992, although the Supreme Court of Russia ruled in 1993 that insufficient evidence existed to prove Chikatilo's guilt in 9 of these murders. Following the rejection of his appeal to the Russian Supreme Court, Chikatilo filed a final appeal for clemency with President Boris Yeltsin. The final appeal was rejected on the 4th of January 1994. On February 14, 1994, Chikatilo was taken from his death row cell to a soundproofed room in Novocherkassk prison and executed with a single gunshot behind the right ear. Theodore Robert Bundy was an American serial killer who kidnapped, raped, and murdered numerous young women and girls during the 1970s and possibly earlier. After more than a decade of denials before his execution in 1989, he confessed to 30 homicides that he committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978. The true number of victims is unknown and possibly higher. Bundy was regarded as handsome and charismatic, traits that he exploited to win the trusts of victims and society. He would typically approach his victims in public places before knocking them unconscious and taking them to secluded locations to rape and strangle them. In 1975, Bundy was jailed for the first time when he was incarcerated in Utah for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault. He then became a suspect in a progressively longer list of unsolved homicides in several states. Facing murder charges in Colorado, he engineered 2 dramatic escapes and committed further assaults in Florida, including 3 murders, before his ultimate recapture in 1978. For the Florida homicides, he received 3 death sentences in 2 separate trials. Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison in Rayford, Florida on January the 24th, 1989. If you liked the video, please help us with the algorithm by liking, commenting, sharing, and/or subscribing.